Hello, YouTubers. Joe Kersey here on October 8th, Wednesday, 2014 at a little after 1 in the afternoon Eastern Daylight Time, and welcome to part 4 of the October Autobiography series, devoted to little vignettes and segments about my life as an undergraduate at Ohio State University between 1969 and June of 1972. Today I want to talk to you about sort of my life in the chemistry department as a student, and also then subsequently for 2 years as a lab instructor. And what happened is, on October 1st, 1969, that was the first day of class, and that was the first day I encountered one of the three men other than my dad that had the most significant impact on my life. Well, there actually may have been 4 other guys other than my dad that had well, 5 now that I'm thinking about it. Well, anyway, this fellow was one of them. And even though he's still alive, although he's in his 80s, I'll tell you his name. His name is William Thomas Lippincott. Dr. William Thomas Lippincott. He was professor of chemistry at the Ohio State University, and then he subsequently, I think in 73, 74, maybe 75, went down to the University of Arizona at Tucson. Excuse me. And interestingly enough, my sister had him for chemistry when she was up there at Ohio State in 1961. And of course, she remembered him. This man was magnetic and riveting, and just one of the best teachers and instructors and professors you could ever hope to have down in the front of a classroom. And in terms of being a decent, kind, helpful human being, there have probably been few people that have trod the earth that would match this guy in his willingness to help people and go the extra 2 miles. Let alone the extra mile. He'd go 2 miles, maybe more. Well, he came in to teach us Chemistry 121, and this is a room, but there's about 300 people in this room. But it was one of these old style sort of semicircular lecture halls that, like theater seating. Wooden seats, not this plush crap they have today. Wooden seats. And a big demonstration bench down front, and then you had like this tier of blackboards, that were sort of like triple hung. So as he would write with his left hand, and he'd fill up one set of boards while he's talking, although he would generally not have his back to us very much at all. He'd run one of the boards up, then another one would come down, and he'd fill that one up too. And just astonishingly clear. I mean, you were zooming around inside those molecules with this guy. You were getting into the electron shells and the energy levels and this and that, and really, really fantastic. And fortunately, the way my schedule was set up, after you had 3 lecture sessions, and then you had two lecture sessions, 2 labs, 2 3-hour labs, and then a recitation, 1-hour recitation section on Friday. So, Monday and Wednesday you'd have lectures. Tuesday, Thursday you have labs. And but my schedule was such I could go down at the end of the lecture and just stand and listen to people ask questions. Even if I didn't have any particular questions, I'd go down there and just stand and listen to this guy and listen to how he interacted with other students and so forth. And over time, of course, even if you aren't asking anything, your presence becomes known. The fellow becomes aware of your presence. More cynical people might call that FaceTime. I just call that, trying to get on in the world. Was it done deliberately at first? Yes. Was it done deliberately after the first couple times? No. It was done after, it was done out of a genuine desire to do this and hear what this guy had to say. Well, I had him for 121 and 122 my freshman year. And then, now 123, I had another fellow for, 123 was qualitative analysis. And so toward the end of spring quarter of 1970, which would be the end of my freshman year, I was very surprised to get a letter from the chemistry department asking me to be a student lab assistant, which basically meant I was going to teach freshman chemistry lab if I agreed to do that. Of course, I jumped at the chance. First of all, it was going to be $75 a month. They're going to pay me $75 a month, which was a huge help to me at that. That'd be like the equivalent of $300 a month today. And yes, I mean, wow, and so what the job entailed was, you had to go, if you were, depending on what course sequence you were teaching, either 121, 122, 123, or 101 or 102 or 103, which were the 101, 102, 103 series was sort of the lower level sequence. The 121, 122, 123 was generally for like pre-professional people or people who then ultimately would go on to major in chemistry. You had to go to the lecture for that particular, professor for that group of students that you would be teaching. You had to go then, of course, teach the lab, which would be 2 6-hour sessions a week. And then you'd have to go to the recitation section to hear what what they were being asked and how they were being quizzed and so forth. And then, although you were not required to do this, I did do it. I'd go to the weekly help sessions that they would have, that the particular professor would be holding for that course, which would include, anybody from that in that particular course could come to that at that. So you've got 1, 2, 3, lecture, recitation. That's 3 hours. Labs, 6 hours. Go to a help session. That's an hour, maybe 2 hours. So we're up to 11. And then the grading of the lab reports, which would generally take anywhere from 4 to 6 hours a week. So you're looking at between 15 and 18 hours a week work for this for $75 a month. Believe you me, that $75 a month helped me a lot. But plus also just the experience of teaching. Both my folks taught, I myself, if I'd been left to my own devices, probably would have gone into teaching history. But nonetheless, this was great. And so I still have my little grade books here, that when I taught these for the 6 quarters. I thought I hadn't taught as much in the 120 sequence as I did. But looking back on this, I taught 121 2 quarters. I taught 123 qualitative analysis 2 quarters, and I taught 101 2 quarters. Now I'm going to tell you, it was harder for me to teach the 101 than it was the 120 sequence, because the 101 just didn't, in order to really understand something, you have to have a lot of detail. And the 101 students weren't getting a lot of detail. So they were a lot more puzzled, because they'd also ask you questions about stuff that was in the lecture, But I would have sworn, before I dug these things back up, I would have said I'd gotten stuck with the 101 sequence or 100, 101, 102, 103 sequence more than I had. Because it was a lot harder to deal with those folks than it was with the 120. Just in terms of, because they weren't quite as sharp. And again, like I said, they were handicapped by not having enough information, I thought. Well, one of the things that might have helped me get this job, other than sort of being down front, getting some awareness time, was there was some specific. I actually at one point did have a specific question about a lab procedure when I was actually his student, as opposed to his employee, or supervisee, I guess more properly. And I tried to make an appointment. I tried to make a phone call, make an appointment, So I'm just going to sit outside this man's door, I understand from when my son was in school 20 years later that wouldn't have worked. And I imagine now it wouldn't work at all. But it worked then, and it worked in my dad's day, which was back in the 1930s. So when the guy, when my professor emerged, I just stood up. Oh, and he recognized me, and we fell into conversation, and I think he liked me, and I certainly liked him, and I think that may have been one reason why I got this job. So sometimes lying in wait works, folks. Anyway, he, as I said, he was very, very patient and helpful. He would stand there and listen to some of the most, if you don't understand and you have a question, you don't understand, have a question. But sometimes when the question's been answered 5 different ways, or more, and you still don't quite get it, then perhaps the onus then falls back onto the questioner, as opposed to the questionee to continue in the endeavor to have understanding. And there was one occasion where this one fellow came in and he was having some problem with some lab thing. Well, I mean, it's, yeah, I mean, technique is all when you're in the lab. And we'd gone down the well-trodden path about 5 times, and Dr. Lippincott had answered the question many, 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 many times. Well, at least 5 times. And so, the kid goes into this again. Well, then if I try that, what do I do? What if I try that and it doesn't work? What do I do? He had this habit. He'd sort of cock his head to the side while he was kind of stifling a little bit of a burp, And he said, well, at that point, I guess you're just going to have to go jump off the stadium. Which elicited, a number of chuckles, a couple of overt laughs, and a couple of applauses from the crowd that was standing, because there were about 10 other students standing around that wanted to really ask others, ask stuff. And the kid kind of walked off. Well, didn't kind of walk off, he walked off. But, that makes him sound mean. He's not. He was not. This man was not mean. He was very, very, very compassionate. And just to sort of finish this up, of course, I told my dad about this guy. And one day, my dad had to go up to Columbus for some reason, I think connected with, he had to check something at state teacher's retirement. He was going to try to check his state teacher's retirement account before he retired. And he knew how much I admired this man. And I didn't know my dad was in town. And my dad told me this later. He said, well, I figured while I was in town, I'd go see this Dr. Lippincott you talked so much about. And he went over and, basically knocked on his office door, and did what I did and waited him out to see him. Because he wanted to meet this guy that I'd talked so much about and clearly admired. I always thought that was great. And occasionally I'd go over at his office on a Saturday. He was editor of the Journal of Chemical Education, and I wouldn't go over there specifically, but I'd be in the building. Oh, it's because I had to go check. All the lab assistants had a room where we had our mailboxes and stuff. I'd go over there to check my mailbox over there, and he'd see me in the hall. He said, "So I'm putting the magazine together. Come on in." And he'd be doing the layout. He'd have these he had this big table where they'd lay out things and for the various pages, and we'd sit there and talk while he worked, and that was great. Wonderful, wonderful personal relationship developed, and I talked to him on the phone here, probably about 15 months ago. Yeah, one of the most significant people in my life, anyway. So that was my, before I started, lecturing to the nurse anesthetists when I was a clinical instructor of anesthesia at Ohio State, and then when I was an assistant professor at Ohio State very briefly. That's my excursion into teaching. So on that note, bye-bye, YouTubers.